The Untold Story of the Titanic Survivors. April 15, 1912. The most famous ship in history had just sunk beneath the freezing Atlantic Ocean. More than 1,500 people were gone. But what happened to the 705 survivors who made it out alive? For many of them, surviving the RMS Titanic sinking was only the beginning of a lifetime marked by guilt, trauma, and strange twists of fate. Some became heroes. Some were haunted forever, and one survivor was saved by a bottle of whiskey. This is the untold story of the Titanic survivors. The night everything changed. The RMS Titanic was one of the most famous ships in history, known both for its luxury and its tragic sinking. The Titanic was a massive British passenger liner built by the company White Star Line. It was designed to carry wealthy passengers in extreme comfort, along with hundreds of emigrants seeking new lives in America. It was built in Belfast at the Harland and Wolff shipyard. At the time, it was the largest ship ever built. Had luxury features like swimming pool, gymnasium, grand staircase, fine dining restaurants. Many believed it was nearly unsinkable because of its advanced watertight compartments. The Titanic set sail on its first journey, called a maiden voyage, on April 10, 1912, traveling from Southampton to New York City. On April 14, 1912, the ship struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean. The damage caused water to flood multiple compartments. In the early hours of April 15th, the Titanic sank during what is now known as the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Over 2,200 people were on board. More than 1,500 died. There were not enough lifeboats, which made the tragedy worse. When the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg just before midnight, chaos slowly spread across the massive ship. At first, many passengers didn't even realize the danger. Music was still playing. People were still chatting in the dining rooms. But within hours, the ship that had been called unsinkable began slipping beneath the ocean. There were only 20 lifeboats on board, and they could carry about half the people on the ship. Because of the rule, women and children first, most of the survivors who escaped in lifeboats were women and children. Many husbands, fathers, and brothers stayed behind on the sinking ship. Those who survived watched the Titanic disappear into the dark Atlantic. Then came the worst moment, the screams. For nearly 20 minutes, survivors in the lifeboats could hear the cries of people freezing in the icy water. And then, silence. For many survivors, that sound never left them. The baker who survived the impossible. One of the most unbelievable survival stories belonged to Charles Joen, the chief baker on the Titanic. While the ship was sinking, Joen helped load passengers into lifeboats. He also threw dozens of deck chairs into the ocean, hoping they could be used as flotation devices. But as the ship went down, Joen found himself still on board. Instead of panicking, he did something unusual. He started drinking whiskey. A lot of it. Eventually, when the Titanic finally sank, Joen was thrown into the freezing Atlantic. The water temperature was around -2 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill most people within minutes. But somehow Joen survived. He stayed in the water for nearly 2 hours before being rescued. Later, he claimed the alcohol helped him stay calm and delayed hypothermia. It remains one of the most mysterious survival stories from the disaster. The survivor who felt guilty for living for many survivors, escaping the Titanic came with something unexpected. Survivor's guilt. One of the most well-known voices of Titanic survivors was Eva Hart. She was only 7 years old when the Titanic sank. Her father put her and her mother into a lifeboat. He stayed behind. Eva never saw him again. For the rest of her life, she spoke about the tragedy in interviews and documentaries. But she always carried the memory of the night her father waved goodbye from the ship's deck. A moment she described as the last time I ever saw him alive. The ship that saved the survivors. Hours after the Titanic disappeared beneath the sea, another ship finally arrived. The RMS Carpathia had raced through the night after receiving Titanic's distress signals. It reached the lifeboats around 4 a.m. One by one, survivors were pulled from the icy ocean. Many were still in shock. Some were crying. Others sat silently, staring into the darkness where the Titanic had once been. When the Carpathia finally arrived in New York City, thousands of people waited at the docks. The world was desperate to hear the stories of those who had lived through the most famous shipwreck in history, life after the Titanic. For many survivors, life after the disaster was complicated. Some became celebrities overnight. Others tried to disappear from the public eye. But almost all of them carried emotional scars. Many survivors said they had nightmares for years. Some refused to travel by ship ever again. Others dedicated their lives to making ships safer. In fact, The Titanic disaster led to major changes in maritime safety laws. Ships were now required to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board, and radio operators had to monitor distress signals 24 hours a day. The last survivor. The final living survivor of the Titanic was Milvina Dean. She had been only 2 months old when the ship sank. Her family escaped in a lifeboat, but her father died in the disaster. Milvina lived until 2009, becoming the last living connection to that tragic night in 1912. When she passed away, it marked the end of a living memory that had lasted nearly a century. More than 100 years later, the story of the Titanic still fascinates the world. But while we remember the ship, the iceberg, and the tragedy, we should also remember the people who survived. Because for them, escaping the RMS Titanic sinking wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a lifetime shaped by one unforgettable night in the Atlantic Ocean. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notification for more interesting stories.